Tonight, economic fears. Another store at the Totem Mall closes. Scam warning. Fort St. John firefighters sounding the alarm. And pushing back. BC's Premier walks back part of Bill 7. Good evening and thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with a series of closures at the Totem Mall, raising concerns about the viability of small business in Fort St. John. 8 stores, all former clothing retailers, now posting for lease signs, while others slash prices as they too prepare to close. And it's caught the eye of the city, who are now weighing what can be done to encourage shopping local.
Trying to make it easier to find the businesses, what they offer, and then looking at some of the costs, because we found a lot of our smaller businesses are actually going home-based so that they don't have the overhead cost of a building.
It's going to be a hard landscape in the next year or so, but I don't think all is lost. I think it can be saved. I just think that it's going to take a lot of work to make it happen.
The Fort St. John Chamber of Commerce says economic uncertainty right now may be a factor. The Chamber is currently engaging with business owners, and they're finding that consumers want to know what the business has to offer before visiting, since many now are opting to shop online. The local first approach will aim to make businesses more accessible and visible to shoppers in a bid to increase foot traffic. A targeted marketing strategy is also being developed. That includes guides to highlight local services and to appeal to visitors and transient workers in the city. The Chamber is also looking to address economic barriers and challenges that businesses face with permitting to get to the root cause. As for Northern Lights College, their professor Fazil Rashid said in a statement to CJDC that continued government subsidies are essential for small businesses, and he adds expanding business education and ensuring a sufficient labor supply are also key strategies in preventing further closures. Now, CJDC-TV News reached out to the mall management. We wanted to ask if their rent that they were charging retailers is too high. Well, mall management declined to comment and also refused to allow our cameras into the mall. Cecil Lake Road through the Beaton Valley has reopened after a rock slide. Dawson Creek Maintenance announcing the cleanup of the scene is now complete. Single-lane alternating traffic was in effect on 103 Road after the slide, which occurred on Tuesday. Drivers are being asked to avoid stopping in the area. Monitoring of the slide area is ongoing. More scams across the Peace region to tell you about tonight. The Fort St. John Firefighters Association now warning of a phone scam involving fraudsters posing as local firefighters. The association says they've received reports from residents receiving unsolicited phone calls. The callers, impersonating firefighters, claim to be raising money for charity. The association now asking people to be wary of those calls, saying it's a scam. It comes ahead of their annual charity ball, which is scheduled for May the 3rd. And another scam to warn you about, this one in Hudson's Hope. The district receiving word of suspicious text messages sent by a supposed BC parking department. The texts telling residents they have outstanding parking penalties. Well, the district says it's a scam and government agencies would never ask for personal information via text. They're warning not to click any links included in the message or provide any personal information. It comes as the city of Fort St. John warned of a similar scam involving parking tickets earlier this week. BC Premier David Eby is walking back a key part of the NDP's tariff response bill over concerns it would give his government sweeping powers with no oversight.
My commitment to British Columbians is I will continue to ensure that we have the ability to respond quickly. But if there's a chance for us to retool this and ensure that the safeguards are in place to make people feel comfortable that there's democratic and legislative oversight of these incredibly important provisions, then we will do so.
While his government will be withdrawing that part of the bill, Eby says he plans to table a modified version as standalone legislation in the coming months. The remainder of Bill 7 involves removing interprovincial trade barriers and levying fees on Alaska-bound trucks passing through British Columbia. Conservative leader John Rustad called Eby's partial retreat a small win for democracy, but he urges its full repeal to protect local rights and prevent the centralization of power. Provincial health officials are encouraging British Columbians to make sure they're up to date with their measles vaccine. BC's top doctor saying today in a press conference that respiratory illness season has come to an end, but the province will soon launch a spring COVID-19 immunization campaign. Dr. Bonnie Henry says COVID-19 hospitalizations have hit the lowest level since 2020, while respiratory cases have been declining as well. The latest COVID immunization campaign will begin on April the 8th. And Dr. Henry is ending the requirement for medical masks in healthcare settings where patients are being cared for. And anyone born after 1970 is also being asked to check their immunization record to ensure that they're fully protected against the measles. Dr. Henry says there has been misinformation and concerning messaging about vaccinations against the measles, particularly coming from south of the border. Dr. Henry wants to make clear there is an abundance of medical evidence about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine in eliminating measles over the past 50 years. One man is in custody after yet another healthcare worker in BC was violently attacked on the job. Police were called to the Eagle Ridge Hospital in Port Moody around 8:30 last night after reports of a patient assaulting a medical staff member. Colby Jandrew was arrested and charged with assault as well as assaulting a peace officer. It comes just weeks after a nurse was strangled by a patient at Vancouver General Hospital and another nurse was punched at Langley Memorial. While on vacation, a family from Salmon Arm received a security alert that someone was at their front door. Well, at first they thought it could be a break-in, but instead it was something much stranger. Stephen Slouse says he was able to watch in real time as a salesperson wearing a Rogers uniform rang the doorbell at his home in the Shuswap region of BC. Well, when no one answered, the man walked over to the carport, where you can see there, and relieved himself on the family car. He says it took him a moment to register what he was witnessing, saying it ruined that last evening on his family's trip on Vancouver Island. As far as Rogers, the company says the man is a third-party contractor, saying the individual is no longer employed by the vendor, and we've reached out to the impacted homeowner to apologize. Well, the Canadian economy kicked off 2025 with some solid growth. Stats Canada says real gross domestic product rose by 0.4% in January. It's largely due to a boom in oil and gas and mining. Growth in the goods-producing sector was partially offset by a slowdown in retail, but there are early signs that growth hit a wall in February as the Canadian economy braced for the full impact of Donald Trump's tariffs. And Prime Minister Mark Carney and President Donald Trump have spoken for the first time. The Prime Minister saying today they had a constructive conversation, but Carney informed Trump that Canada was not backing down after the U.S. President imposed auto tariffs this week. CTV's Judy Trin reports.
We had a very constructive discussion.
After 2 weeks of silence since being sworn in, Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke to U.S. President Donald Trump for the first time.
You know, I've always loved Canada, and we had a very good conversation with the Prime Minister. They've got an election going on, so we're going to meet after the election.
On social media, Trump referred to Carney as Prime Minister and said they would meet after the election. That collegial tone is remarkably different from how he referred to Carney's predecessor.
I call him Governor Trudeau.
For months, Trump has been threatening to turn Canada into the 51st state. At the Port of Montreal, Carney was asked if Trump was still a threat to Canadian sovereignty.
This was a call between two leaders of their respective governments, between two sovereign nations.
The trade war with the U.S. is expanding. Trump has now imposed tariffs on automobiles, along with tariffs on steel and aluminum. Carney told Trump Canada will retaliate after the White House announces its additional reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd.
This is the start of negotiations. We will see what the United States does on the 2nd of April.
After his call with Trump, Carney chaired a First Ministers meeting and updated the premiers. Some remain skeptical despite the change in Trump's tone.
I urged the Prime Minister to work with our allies around the world. The President is attacking countries everywhere right now.
The next round of Trump's tariffs is expected by next Wednesday. The Prime Minister says in the interim, talks between U.S. Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick and Canada's International Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc will intensify, which could mean another face-to-face meeting in Washington next week. Judy Trin, CTV News, Montreal.
And staying with Mark Carney's phone call to President Trump, it was a development that the other federal party leaders addressed directly on the campaign trail today. CTV's Jeremy Sharon has more from Ottawa.
An afternoon campaign stop was Mark Carney's first today after spending his second day in a row focused on the trade war in his role as Prime Minister.
Today, President Trump and I spoke on the phone.
Carney described the highly anticipated call as very constructive. The first discussion between the two leaders comes in the face of new tariffs from Trump set to take effect next week.
We agreed to begin comprehensive negotiations about a new economic and security relationship between our two sovereign countries immediately following the federal election.
The call led to a marked shift in tone from the president, who called it extremely productive.
We had a very good talk, the Prime Minister and myself, and I think things are going to work out very well between Canada and the United States.
A call that other party leaders addressed directly today, too.
I was glad to learn that the President and Prime Minister spoke today, and like all Canadians, I hope they had a successful talk, and I look forward to hearing about the results that they achieved.
I want this call to be successful. Like I said before, there are many things I'm going to attack Mark Carney on when it comes to domestic policy, but when it comes to our fight against Donald Trump, we all need to be united.
While on the campaign front, from a lumber yard in Nanaimo, British Columbia, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre promised to be tougher on crime.
A new Conservative government will impose life sentences for the most serious cases of fentanyl distribution, gun smuggling, and human trafficking.
Oh, that's so cool. Tell her I say hi to you.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was focused on housing during a stop in Toronto today, restating his commitment on affordable housing.
We are going to ban large corporate landlords from engaging in the predatory practice of buying up affordable homes.
Carney also met with premiers today following his call with Trump. He's promised to keep them updated on the trade war during the campaign. Jeremy Sharon, CTV News, Ottawa.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife have arrived for an uninvited trip to Greenland. Vance touched down for the controversial visit. He then made his way to a military base where he offered this first impression of the territory to U.S. soldiers.
How we doing? It's cold as here. Nobody told me.
Vance and the Second Lady are visiting the U.S. Space Force outpost on the northwest coast of Greenland. A larger trip had been planned, but it was scaled back after an uproar in Greenland. People there are upset about Donald Trump's repeated remarks that the semi-autonomous Danish territory should be controlled by the United States. And search and rescue efforts are underway following a powerful earthquake that struck Myanmar and Thailand. More than 150 people are confirmed to have died, and dozens are still missing. Morgan Norwood reports from New York.
A powerful 7.7 magnitude earthquake rocking Myanmar and Thailand's capital city of Bangkok, bringing down this 30-story skyscraper that was still being built, trapping dozens of construction workers. Rescue crews pulling the injured out on stretchers, searching for anyone still trapped underneath the debris. Thailand's prime minister visiting the site of the collapse. In Bangkok, this video shows how the shaking caused water from the high-rise pools to cascade onto the ground like waterfalls. People frantically running out into the streets.
I did think, should I go under the table? But then I thought maybe not. I'll just take everything and run down the stairs, which is what I did.
Suddenly everything started moving around, and I was looking what was happening first. I had no idea. And just quickly went outside and downstairs.
This man saying he's lucky to be alive.
I was praying the pagoda in monastery, and suddenly the ground was started shaking. We were so shocked at the time. The monastery suddenly fell down. I was so lucky at the time. I was under the tree.
The epicenter of the quake was in Myanmar, more than 600 miles away, where civil war is raging, making it difficult to get information on the damage and complicating emergency responses. An ABC producer there says there are reports of devastated buildings and a hospital with patients inside reportedly torn down. And as the emergency response continues, Myanmar's military-run government says they've declared a state of emergency for several areas. Morgan Norwood, ABC News, New York.
All right, please stay tuned. I'll be right back with weather, but as we head to break, a look at today's closing market numbers.